that fallen nature is going to have us do exactly what you described. If we give into it, it says isolate, it says withhold, it says don't reveal, and thinking somehow that that's going to get you through a fallen moment or a fallen experience. And even like you were saying, Bob, whether it's a short daily one or the mass of our experience in mortality, hiding or even giving into shame or some of these emotions that are usually that have accompanied part of my journey in feeling these things, therein is where, again, it's a beautiful I don't know if it's really a contradiction, but it's an aha where, like, you're sitting there feeling those things and you actually discover that feeling these things is an invitation and an opportunity to make a choice.
As sons of God, men have so much capacity for good, joy, and happiness, but far too often they're depressed, disconnected, and unfulfilled. Man Talk for Latter-day Saints is dedicated to creating conversations with Latter-day Saint men about the things that are critical to men becoming their best selves, including spiritual, mental, and emotional well-being. Men need other men to help them become healthy, grounded, confident men. And our intent is to help Latter-day Saint men become the men God has created us to be. Hello, and welcome to Man Talk for Latter-day Saints. My name is Matt Allred. I am on the board of One Heart, One Light, a nonprofit organization that teaches skills to help people with a Latter-day Saint background process their emotions in healthy ways, rewrite limiting beliefs, and access the power of Christ's atonement in real time.
Hello, everyone. This is Bob Smith, and I'm on a mission to create strong, connected, and happy families and societies in our world. And I personally believe that that starts with powerful, loving, purpose-driven husbands, fathers, and men. And so because of that, I've created a program called the Be Powerful Program. I'm the LDS Men's Empowerment Coach, and I help men turn stress, anxiety, stuck, and doubt into total empowerment in every aspect of their life. And it's what I love to do.
And I'm Dan Chambers. I'm a master coach, a teacher, and the owner of Unlimited Soul Coaching. I teach people how to use their agency to more deeply connect to their identity and live a life that they love.
Thank you. So today we are talking about the fall of man. And as we've talked as a group about this, there's definitely a negative connotation. But I also want to point out, and we want to talk about, but really the journey of a man to become who God created him to be. So with that, I'm just going to push it off to one of you. Dan, how would you like to talk about this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think we all, I guess I'll speak for me. I've noticed my experience with feeling fallen and bumping into that nature and that experience of being fallen. And what I've continued to learn through my journey is that essentially my old interpretation of that experience of it being almost a negative thing to be fallen has changed tremendously as I progressed in my journey to know who I am and to better understand Jesus Christ and his atonement, in that I see that it's really the path, that this fallen experience is actually the perfectly designed path for the becoming of who I am. So just that general paradigm shift has been one of the biggest things that has assisted me in thinking about this concept.
Bob, what are your thoughts as we kick this off?
Yeah, I love what Dan shared. Couldn't agree more. And as far as the fall is concerned, I think Dan saying that this is the path couldn't have been more spot on. And I think we can see that in small ways and in large ways in our life, like the divorce process I went through. That felt like a big fall for me, like a big change, a big upheaval. And then the question is what did I learn from that? How were my eyes opened as a result of that? Or even in smaller ways, like I got upset when I was in traffic today, or I got upset at my child, or I got frustrated with my spouse. There's all these small ways in which we could say these are part of the fall, or maybe this is my own personal fall. And then always the question that we can come back to is, what am I to learn from this? And what do I want to do from this place? How am I able to learn, from this experience that I'm having?
No, that's great. That's great. And I love, so part of what's going through my mind is, as a man growing up in the church, I adopted a kind of a perfectionistic mindset of, hey, I'm just doing everything right, right? Repentance is for people who sin, right? And if I don't go that path, then hey, I don't need to worry about that. I'm just going to do it all right. I'm going to be the perfect husband, the perfect father, and that's obviously, I shouldn't say obviously because maybe it's not obvious, but it didn't happen. And so I find myself in my 40s, depressed, lonely, disconnected, still married, but lonely in myself because where are my friends? Where are the people I can really connect with? And even with in my own marriage, I was very withdrawn, and no, I can't allow her to see my real self, and feeling like somehow that I could avoid the fall, that I could avoid this thing that we're talking about. And I love what both of you have said. This is the path. We have to go through it. And part of what I hope comes out of this is not just that we have to go through it, but as men, we can support each other through that. We don't have to go it alone, even though, in my opinion, a lot of men want to go it alone, right? They'd rather hide out. And I'm as guilty as anybody. I'm just going to isolate until I figure this out, and then I'll show up. What thoughts do you have on some of that?
Yeah, as you say that, Matt, one of the things again I notice is that it is the irony, or maybe the destiny, right? Depending on how you view it, that that fallen nature is going to have us do exactly what you described. If we give into it, it says isolate, it says withhold, it says don't reveal. All of that is bad. Hide in a way, right? Like this, like message of hide. That what do? You hide, and thinking somehow that that's going to get you through a fallen moment or a fallen experience. And even like you were saying, Bob, whether it's a short daily one or the mass of our experience in mortality, hiding or even giving into shame or some of these emotions that are usually that have accompanied my part of my journey in feeling these things really isn't the path. And I think but therein is where, again, it's a beautiful I don't know if it's really a contradiction, but it's an aha, where like you're sitting there feeling those things, and you actually discover that feeling these things is an invitation and an opportunity to make a choice, a new choice that in some ways I hadn't made, and that in some ways I get to make every day, around choosing to return to the source of that redemption, of that healing, and to almost remember that God, his loving ways are so much bigger than this fallen moment. And so again, like within the context of this journey, you get these micro and major moments in which you get to go, you because of that feeling, you
Sure.
get to make a choice. And to me, that's so why that's why I feel the fall is valuable to me, is because it just gives me choice, opportunity to practice that routine again and
Right.
again.
So for just a second about, you said a choice I hadn't made. Put that in context just so our listeners can understand what you mean by that.
Yeah. So, like you, Matt, I think one of the natural man tendencies, and one that in some ways had been mingled into what I thought was true, is that I had to somehow do this on my own, right? That it was a failure, even within the framework of my faith, to almost need the Savior to help me do something. Unless, as you said, unless I'd sinned, I saw, oh yeah, yeah, I understand the sin part of this, but the part of it where He enables me, He strengthens me, that was the part that was a new choice that I hadn't learned and understood, that's part of how the atonement really works, is in this framework of empowering me to become something more and learn how to use my agency. I hadn't thought the atonement can help me use my agency. I had thought, yeah, it'll help me from sin. But so that was that new experience for me
Thank
that
you.
I hadn't made, that I began to make.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Bob, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, having it be a daily thing. A couple of things that really jump out to me with what you guys are saying is, first and foremost, I think it's really easy to go to the place of judgment around this and say, I shouldn't be feeling the way that I'm feeling. Like because I have the priesthood, because I have the gospel, because I have all these scriptures, in my literal fingertips, right? Carry them around in our phone now, because we have prophets, because we have revelation, because we have all these things. I should be better than I am. It gives us license to almost utilize that against ourselves, in my opinion,
Sure.
and to say, because I have all of these things, I should be better than I am. I should be acting better than I am. I shouldn't get frustrated with my kids at times. I shouldn't be annoyed at my spouse. I should be more motivated to go to work. I shouldn't feel all these things that I'm feeling. But what I found is, with me as my first client and with all the clients that I coach, is you absolutely should be feeling that way. And now let's try to understand why you're feeling that way. And when we can understand why that is, in what ways are you thinking about whatever is going on in your life that's creating that experience for you? Um, let me I can give you a quick example. Do you want me to give you a quick example, kind
Sure.
of to
Yeah.
make it a little bit more tangible, maybe? There was a guy that I coached who had been stuck on a project for several years. It was a project that his daughters had asked him to do. It was putting together photos, like digitizing photos from 30 or 40 years worth of life and history, which was a big deal. And he knew how to do it. He was a very organized person, by nature and in his profession and otherwise. He had the place identified that he could take the photos to once he had them organized, and they could, do all the digitizing process and do all that. So he had like all of the tools he needed. So if you almost think about that as like, here are the tools, here's all the resources, they're all totally available. He has the money to pay for it. It's not like he was in any kind of lack. But when we explored that a little bit more deeply, he was concerned subconsciously that it would be a failure by the time he reached the end. That something about that would communicate to him that this has been a failure. And if you can imagine this, there is also a concern about, when I hand this over to my kids, what if they don't like this gift that I'm giving them? It was almost like, I'm going to be rejected by my kids, and my whole life that I'm now presenting, which is now captured in these photos, is going to be rejected. And so him not even knowing that that was there for him and was present, but yet was causing him to procrastinate, to pull away, to not do. I mean, this project had sat in his closet for 3.5 years with, his kids begging him to do it. And all we had to do was shine the light on what was really happening for him and say, of course, that's going to sound scary. Of course, that's going to be a scary experience for you. Like, who of us wants to feel rejected? Who of us wants to feel like we've done this, put this beautiful gift together, and now it's not being accepted, by the people that we care most about and whose opinion we value the most? And then once he did that and worked with me for a few more weeks, within about 6 weeks, he was about 95% done with that project, all because we shined the light where the light needed to be shown on in order for him to see what was really there. So I think that kind of speaks back to what Dan was saying as well. And Dan, don't let me put words in your mouth, but like there's really kind of this sense of understanding. But when we put that layer of judgment around it that says, I shouldn't be feeling scared, I shouldn't feel anxious, I have all the tools I need, I've got everything I need in order to make this work the way it needs to work. But yet, what is it that's blocking us? And so when we understand what it is that's blocking us, that's when we really take agency back into our hands and empowerment back into our hands to then take the next steps forward. And without that clarity, we're really, we stay stuck and really in a really pretty powerless situation. What
Yeah.
are your
And
thoughts on that, Dan? I mean, Matt.
oh, well, so what was coming up for me was, when Dan talked about a choice I didn't make, I'm envisioning myself as a little child, and I'm growing up in this environment where things, I don't understand. I don't understand maybe why mom doesn't pick me up as soon as I want to when I'm crying, or I get, spanked on the butt with a wooden spoon when I steal cookies out of the cookie jar. But a lot of the beliefs about myself that I've taken on in order to comprehend this world, and from, I'm not a psychologist, but from the reading I've done, we all come up with these beliefs. Oh, I must not be good enough. Oh, I'm not as good as my brother. Oh, I'm not as smart as my whatever. As I take those on, those to me become the platform from which I act. But to your point, Bob, I'm totally unconscious. I don't even know why I'm avoiding putting pictures in this book. I don't realize that I'm so hungry for validation that I can't exercise my own agency to say, I don't care if you like it or not. I'm still going to give it to you. This is from me. Whether you accept it or not is all about you. So that's kind of what's coming up for me, and the power of consciousness that I hear you speaking to, Bob, and the power of agency, Dan. That without those two, I think we just stumble around. And so, for me, the journey of maybe it's my midlife crisis, but kind of starting to become conscious and starting to saying, whoa, I can't, not only can I exercise my agency, if I don't, I'm going to continue to be miserable. I'm going to continue to blame other people for how I'm acting. And that's a horrible way to live.
Yeah, I very much agree. And I almost feel like there's an additional gradient, so to speak, or maybe another point, another connection, right? When we think about this process of, and essentially being able to be conscious of something, and then use our agency relative to what is coming up and what we're noticing. The ingredient there to me personally that's made such a tremendous difference, and I watch in my clients, is that also identity, like this framework of making a connection that, like for me, that's one of the main principles I start with all my clients, is this connection between you have an identity. Is your agency aligning with that identity? Are you using it to create a connection to this who you are energy? Recognizing that there's, especially midlife gives us this, it seems like it's designed to almost all the dissonance between who we are and who we think we're supposed to be type energies or whatever. It's like they collide.
Sure.
And one of them's going to kind of come out on top or something. It's like they come together in this way that we almost can no longer be unconscious about it. It seems to bring it forward. And then we get, and my experience has been what's helped me through that is connection to my identity. In addition to understanding these ideas and shining light, it's like, oh, but who am I? Oh, I'm a son of God. I'm a disciple of Christ, right? And our prophet, and I'm a child of the covenant. Like you start to add identity pieces in, and I notice that it's much easier to reframe out of the wobbles when I have a like, oh, but this is who I am way to come back. And I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts.
Yeah, and I'd love to have you just expound that a little bit more. And how do you connect? Because I can't tell you how many times I've sung "I am a child of God" and still felt like a lousy piece of trash inside, right? So I'm singing it, but I'm not connecting with it.
Yeah, and I think you just hit the head on it. Like, this is not something that it's not knowledge, it's not here.
Sure.
It's here.
Sure.
And so I think men in particular, the journey from here to here sometimes can be the longest journey that we ever go. And so, and I'm pointing from my head to my heart. I realize we're talking on a podcast. So from my head to my heart, like this is a journey to our heart. And so identity lives there. And so for me, how do I do that in my space? I notice how much it's actually changed the framework of how I pray and my interaction, my literal daily interaction with God and thinking about the Savior and my literal interaction with him. It's now a more heart-based, without getting, into the deep weeds of these things. But I notice that if my heart's not involved, it doesn't work. Essentially, It doesn't work till my heart makes a connection to them in a real relationship format. And then I can feel, as you said, because I can feel that I am a child of God and a disciple of Christ, and I feel it. And I guess another piece here, and I would love, again, I think you guys have had this similar experience, I make up at least, but that you don't do that once, right? It's like, oh, okay, I know, I figured it out. Like, this is a daily / like hourly experience if we allow it, or if we begin to build a life around making that heart connection that says, this is who I am, and it's linked to God, it's linked to Christ. Then it's very powerful in our lives. But for me, that is the journey of my life. That is not a quick fix or like, hey, I did it energy. So
love that. Bob, what you got?
Gosh, yeah, I totally agree with that. I think his comment about journey from our head to our heart can be one of the longest. I mean, it took me 40 years wandering in the wilderness, to go back to biblical terms of doing it, like literally 40 years for me to do that. And I'm still on that journey. So there wasn't a stop to that. But prior to that, I can tell you that what I believed before in my belief of not good enoughness, the way that that showed up is I was very disconnected. It was almost like now I'm putting a plate between my head and my heart. Like there was really no connection or very little connection there. I never remember crying. I remember getting emotional when I saw some movies or when my children were born or had some of these really sweet, tender, special experiences. But on a regular day-to-day basis, it just felt like I was so up in my head all of the time that it was like I was getting some things done, but I wasn't feeling fulfilled in any way. Like I just wasn't. And my ex-spouse, what she'd call that shell guy. It's like, oh, you're going into your shell guy mode, which it means kind of close off, shut out. I hated when she would say that term, and now I see it. I'm like, gosh, I can totally see that. I totally resonate with that. Like I just was not connected with my heart space. And to Dan's point, that's not just a one-time thing; it's a daily, hourly event. So one of the most helpful things for me, just in my journey, was just recognizing that I have emotions.
Mm.
And number two, which is something that I think is so critical. And so, anyone listening to this, please take this to heart, literally, is the emotions that you feel are totally okay to feel. What I believed literally was if I were good enough and if I were doing all the right things, which I think in the back of which now I see as like just trying to compensate for my not good enoughness, belief that I had underneath. But if I did enough of the right things, that then my life would be happy and smooth, and my family would feel this way, and it would be this way, and like time would be balanced, and my church callings, and giving to my work, and all of this. And there was still this absolute sense of emptiness, even though I was having good moments and good spiritual experiences and did all these things along the way. It just felt very, very empty. And I think it's because of my resistance to the other emotions that are part of the normal human experience. It's normal for us to get annoyed at times. It's so normal for us to feel frustrated. It's so normal for us to go into victim mode at times and to blame others for how we feel and say it's my boss or it's my wife or it's my kids acting this way. And if my kids would act better than they do, then I would feel so much better about myself and about my life and know that I'm doing a great job as a dad and all these things. And all that stuff is so normal. The key here is owning it. And when we own it, to do so from a place of absolute love and compassion for ourselves, knowing that there's a reason why we're feeling the way we are. It's because of how we're thinking about the situation. And so when we want to change that, that's where we got to start with the beliefs, the underlying, the unconscious. We need to kind of dig up what's there, shine a light on it, and let's hold it in this really safe place of being totally okay with what's there. Because that, going back to our topic of the fall, I mean, it's messy.
Yeah.
What I thought my life was going to be was if I live in the gospel the right way, it's just going to be on this linear trajectory, and money is going to be saved in the bank, and work is going to go fine, and my family's going to go great, and I'm going to feel great all the time. And it doesn't freaking happen. Like that's just not the way life works, period. And
And
so
isn't
there's
it
got to be
funny?
like a sense of okayness.
Yeah, and it's so funny when you say that, Bob, because I just noticed like I believe the same thing. And if I look at the scriptures are like, why do you believe that? Like, did you not read about Lehi and Nephi and Alma? I mean, just like not one of them has this like smooth trajectory, and yet they're if I were and I don't want to compare, but if I were to compare, like, oh yeah, they're more righteous than me. Like they're ahead of me in terms of this righteousness curve, and their lives are way harder. So I find it like fascinating that's the experience that a lot of us have. And it just, to me, it's again, part of this, like, this is the path, because for some reason we all do that and make it up so that when these challenges and things confront us, or like you say, I agree very much with the emotional side of things like that. Um, I don't know why men in general don't want to feel their emotions, why we want to put like a plate between there and there. When I say that, I guess I notice myself when I say, because it feels safe. There's a
Sure.
false sense of security in choosing to do that, is why I did it. But having said that, right, you begin to open that up and you begin to accept as it were, whether it's the emotions or it's life itself in that bigger sense, right? The emotions could be on the more daily basis, or if it's the like, oh, I lost my job, or yeah, my marriage is going way different than I expected, or whatever it is, like in these bigger areas of our life too, like that like you say, this is actually more normal than it is not normal in terms of the experience.
Oh,
And it in
absolutely.
every situation gives us that opportunity to for me to choose Christ and to choose this path back to him. And in so many ways, he's the one reflecting to me my journey is that, yeah, Dan, you got to feel your feelings. Yeah, like and you need to go through this. Yep, this is part of it. This will be consecrated for you in this journey.
For me,
So,
what's beautiful about this is because so I think we all have the same story. I'm raising my hand saying, yeah, I thought the exact same thing. But what I would love to, and part of the reason I want to have these conversations is because as men, we think we're on an island. And
mm,
yet the guy that's 50, whatever, 5 feet away is on another island. And yet one of my first big experiences was going to a retreat and seeing other men in their vulnerability. And it just blew my mind. And,
mm,
to be able to be in the emotion in community with others and realize, oh my gosh, they're just as human as me. And just because his path looks different really doesn't mean he's that different, because I would have done the same thing if I'd have been on his path, but I'm on my path. And now that I'm seeing this, we can come together and actually support each other on this journey, because the alone it sucks. It's super painful. It's super isolating. It's super, to try to solve all of my problems and then I can show up and help somebody else was what I envisioned. But it's like, well, you're doing the same thing. So why can't I call you and talk through this issue? But I didn't know that for the first 43 years of my life until I started into this. And I mean, there's just so much richness here. Dan, you were talking about identity, as being the child of God, and I know for so long I lived what we call a false self. The true self, the false self. The false self to me is trying to live my life from pleasing everybody else, and so that to me is kind of the, I don't know, maybe the next round here, but let's if we have time, go ahead and maybe kind of finish on true self, false self, and how do we navigate that journey back to true identity?
Yeah, I don't want to go too far off on a tangent here because all three of us we can't hardly clear our throats in 20 minutes each, right? But there's actually something I shared with my group yesterday, and it came from the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and I love that book. And so let me just share a little bit of a concept with this. And so the concept is centers. Like what are we centering ourselves on? And really what that means is what is the lens that we are looking at our lives through and looking at the decisions that we make within our lives through. And so for example, let's say we center ourselves on our spouse and on our marriage. And so that sounds like a really positive thing. Like I want to focus on my wife and I want to focus on my marriage because I want that to be really great. The challenge is when it becomes a center and the focal point is when is then we become dependent on the emotions and the actions and the thoughts and behaviors of the other individual for us to be okay. So in order for us to be okay, they've got to be okay. And that puts us in a very weak and a very vulnerable position to where we can either like back off, go quiet, not say what needs to be said, because when a conflict arises, that's when the challenge exists. And so we either back off and we go quiet and we hold it in and we don't say what needs to be said and we turn resentful and distant and all of that, or you flip to the other side, which is defensive, anger, you don't understand me, let me tell you all of your problems as well. So it sounds like a nice thing, but it actually is the thing that destroys the very thing that we're trying to preserve. And so when I talked with my group through all the different centers that are very common, one of them is our spouse, one of them would be like our family, one of them would be money, One of them could be friend and enemy centered. One could be work centered. One could be self centered. What's interesting about every one of those things, as we talk through them, was we're talking about things that can change, meaning like our money can change. I lost everything I had, or virtually everything I had up to that I'd worked my life for up into that point when I went through the divorce process. I lost a big part of what I felt like was my identity in the church. Like I couldn't serve as a bishop or a stake president or potentially or whatever. So I'm like, well, gosh, does that make me kind of a lesser priesthood holder now, or does it not? I think that's maybe changed since. But the challenge with centering ourselves on something that is dependent on something else outside of us, it makes us really vulnerable and weak. But to go back to Dan's point, is when we center ourselves on something that's rock solid that we can always come back to, something that doesn't change. And so what I would call that would be principle based, because principles don't change, they just are. Principles don't divorce us. Principles don't leave us. Principles don't get upset. It's like the principles within life. And one of the principles, or at least two of the leading principles that I would just like to offer, you or this group or whatever with all this, is the first one, which sounds a little bit cliche, but I think it's really true, is love. Meaning like I have the ability to generate love within my heart. I have the ability to love somebody else without depending on someone else loving me back. I have the opportunity to give of myself in this way, in a truly generous way, even if that isn't given back. This is my choice to feel love for myself, for this person, for the life that I do have, gratitude for my Heavenly Father, for, whatever piece that I want to feel. And when we start from that principle of saying, I get to generate this, that can be really powerful. The second principle that's really, really powerful with this too, that we can center our lives on, is that we are the creator. We are not our thoughts and feelings. We are the thinker and the feeler of our thoughts and feelings. We are not this is happening to me. This is, what do I want to do with this and still create the life that I would like to have? How do I create the experience that I would like to have from this? So I think when we can recenter our lives on correct principles and things that are solid, that's when it feels like our lives don't have to waver, because then the lens that we look through our lives with and make decisions through, it puts all of these other lenses within perspective. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I hear you kind of getting back to Dan's concept of my true identity, right? So the closer I am to my true identity, the less I'm trying to please everybody else and trying to, blame them for things that aren't going right. I take 100% accountability. I'm true to myself. I'm true to the principles. And then, the storm can rage and I'm fine. I think of Jesus as walking through the streets. He's got a cross on his shoulders. They're spitting, they're mocking, they're whipping, they're whatever. Never once did he lash out and say, you guys are idiots. I am here to help you. And you don't get it, right? He didn't, because he knew who he was. He knew his identity. He didn't have to lash out. He didn't have to, make a big scene out of it. It's like, hey, I know who I am. I understand where you're at, and that's about you. But I'm not taking it personal in that way, at least.
100%. And I can still love you and respect you and know that you're having a moment and you're feeling all these emotions for whatever reason that's going on for you, with our spouse, with our kids, with our neighbor, with whoever it might be, our boss, and recognize that and love them and appreciate them, and not have to take it on and mean something about our identity or that something is deficient within us when this happens.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I love the framework of principles as another part of that foundation. So when I just did like that false self versus real self, just that experience, or that maybe experience we all have of noticing these things and discerning these things. The thing that the simple idea that has helped me so much that I would share, it's the word receive. I love to think it just as a pivot to just say, oh, what if I were to receive myself? What if I were to receive God today as well? So this choice, not so much around trying to make something happen. To me, that's That's my false self, and how he thinks he's going to get something done is trying to grab it and make it so. And when I, again, just the receive to me has more of the posture itself is kind of open-handed and open-hearted. And when I choose to receive on a daily basis, I find way more connection with my identity of who I am, with that real self. And that false self, whatever the term we want to use there, my fallen nature, it's like I don't have to get rid of it. It just starts to fade on its own because I'm receiving who I am and who God is as a way of life. And so these things become, I guess for me, one of those paradigms. I don't want to struggle against this. I want to receive it. And so to me, that's probably my thought would be choose to receive. If you choose to receive yourself, and maybe even just start there, my experience has been profound. When I choose to receive who I am, the moment I'm in, the experience that I'm having, and as Bob said, and use the principle of love, like it changes everything. So that kind of, I guess, be my final thought.
That is so beautiful. What the vision I'm seeing, or just picture in my mind rather, is just, it comes from a talk Elder Uchtdorf gave, or President Uchtdorf, can't remember which seat he was in at the time, but of an umbrella, that God's pouring down these blessings, and yet I've got an umbrella essentially shielding myself from all these blessings. What I hear you say is take the umbrella down and just choose to receive that God is pouring down blessings. Even when we're confirmed, the injunction is receive the Holy Ghost. And yet I was probably 40 years old before I ever said, I choose to receive it. It just became conscious that okay, God, I want more of it. Thank you. This is awesome. And so, yeah, the gratitude, the reception, I think are perfectly tied, if you will. I remember hearing that gratitude is the perfect state of receivership. Thank you. Thank you. And that just opens the door to receive.
Gosh, I love what Dan said about that. What comes up for me is like our argument with reality. Like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. My kids shouldn't be acting this way. My wife shouldn't be acting this way. If she really respected me, she'd be, showing up in this way. It's almost like an argument with reality of what is, and saying that shouldn't be this way, but it is that way. And I think where we get stuck is in that judgment part where we use the word should so much. And so I love Dan's concept of how able and willing are we to be open, to be in that receiving mode. And I think this receiving mode is honestly something that men, we need to practice. It's like our receptive mode. How often do we just sit and pet our dog and just let our brains just like think about nothing and just kind of bliss out while we let the sun beat down on our face, while we go for a walk, and while we just appreciate the tree that's growing in our yard, or the grass that's growing here, or the fact that we have a sidewalk to walk on, and that we don't have, I don't know, militia coming in to take us and our family away from our homes. How often do we just sit and just kind of bliss out in that moment? And I can't tell you how much I love what Dan said about that, because I think the more that we can be in that receptive mode and allow ourselves to be there, and the okayness with just who we are, how we feel, what is around us, I think the more that we can empower ourselves to then say, now I'm ready to get back into, now I feel like I have my direction, I have my guidance, I have where I need to go and what would be most needful for this day, almost like the manna of this very day that we live in. So
absolutely beautiful. I love the word okayness, and I just want to end with a phrase my friend says: you're right on time. No matter how bitter your life may feel, you're right on time. So Dan, Bob, thank you both for being here today. It's super exciting to talk to you. Thank you for listening to Man Talk for Latter-day Saints. Please keep listening and subscribe to be notified of new content. At Man Talk, we are talking about the things that matter and that make a difference in the lives of men. If there's something you want us to talk about, please let us know.